Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to be streaming to you live once again here on Adobe Live for my Friday weekly masterclass. Great to see so many of you joining the chat. Matter of fact, let me refresh it so I can see all your lovely faces virtually, all the names at least. Great, great, great. I see people popping in from all over the world, including the UK. And hang on, there we go. Just getting some of this stuff out of my way. Sorry about that. And once again, welcome everyone. Happy Friday, happy Masterclass Friday, as I like to call them, because that's what they are. So here at Adobe Live, if you're new to this, if this is your first time, I'm the photography evangelist here at Adobe, and it's my pleasure to do once again my weekly masterclass where I get to show you some of my favorite things, tips and tricks, deep dives, whatever it is, on various photography topics. Um, Also, if you're watching this on another channel, I see people chiming in over on YouTube and from Amsterdam and Denver, Jay and Pre-Design and Maurice and people coming in from Facebook as well. Great. If you're hanging out on another platform, that's awesome. You can hang out there. But if you want me to see your question, if you want me to see your comment or whatever it is, then it's probably best to head over to b.net/Adobe Live if you have a question or comment. I'll try and look at both chats. There's no guarantee that I'll see it, but if I see it, I'll certainly answer it. So like I see the hello from Maurice and I see the greetings from Kosovo here as well. So and I see Jan and Matthew and I think that was Voodoo Val I saw a minute ago as our moderator. So great to see you all here. All right, now that that's out of the way, and again, the URL for that is b.net/Adobe Live. Now that that's out of the way, what are we doing today? Today is I'm going to continue a topic that I did last year. It's hard to say that now, but yeah, it's been a year ago almost. And that is Photoshop for photographers. And what I mean by that, tips and tricks for Photoshop for photographers. So most photographers that I know are either using Lightroom or Lightroom Classic. So they're using Lightroom or they're using a combination of Lightroom and Photoshop, but they mostly do their management and everything in Lightroom, and therefore they don't necessarily maybe do a lot of editing or a lot of finishing moves, as we like to call them, in Photoshop. So today we're going to take a look at some tips and tricks that all Photoshop users should know, but I'm going to cater to this, since it's a photography masterclass, to mostly photography related tips and tricks for photographers. But again, if you're a Photoshop user and you're not a photographer, you'll probably still get something out of this. All right, without further ado, and now that I've got all the housekeeping out of the way, I'll try and do that quicker next week. Seems like it dragged on this week. Let's head over and get started with the tips and tricks, since I got less than an hour now. All right, with that said, so I'm in Photoshop. I've got it running here. I'm going to go ahead and start off with my first image, which I promised Bill, the guy who submitted this last week for my How I Would Edit Your Images masterclass. You can go back and watch that replay. His was the last image that of the hour that I ran out of time before I got to work on. Then he sent me a separate message on social media and said what he was really trying to accomplish with this image. So it wasn't just so much how I would edit it, but I'm also going to show you how I would accomplish what he wants using some of those Photoshop tips and tricks. So let's go ahead and just open up his raw file that he sent me. And again, he sent me this already as a DNG shot with whatever he shot this with, as Canon EOS 5 Mark D4 or 5D Mark IV. I'm going to go ahead and just start making some changes here. So I'm going to go ahead and switch this over to landscape, making those colors a little warmer. So I'm using the raw profile Adobe Landscape. It looks like some adjustments have already been made. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit auto to see what Camera Raw would give me. And if I agree with those sliders, I will go ahead and leave them. If I disagree, I will make any changes that I disagree with. And I pretty much agree with what's been done here. Like, I don't see anything that's egregious that I need to fix or change. It looks pretty good. All right, so there's some obvious things we want to change in the image itself, but before I get to the image, I like to go ahead and make these kind of global adjustments first. get those out of the way. Let's also go look at the optics here. He's already got his lens profile correction turned on. So without that, you see a little bit of vignetting around the edges. With that, it kind of lightens up that vignetting. So like I said, there's not a whole lot more I would do to this. From the camera raw perspective, I'm just going to go ahead and open it up now. Now that I got the image open, one of the first tips and tricks we're going to do is getting rid of those fence, looks like either a barbed wire fence or they're probably not wires, they're too low to the ground, but getting rid of some of those. So normally you might take like your spot healing brush and kind of carefully paint along the way. But when you're getting rid of something, oh, coyote, thank you. I would call this a wolf all day. So coyote, thanks for letting me know. But normally when you're removing a wire like this and it's straight, it's a lot easier than to just simply drag and try and keep your cursor straight all the way around. Now I'm going to reduce my brush size just a little bit by using my left bracket key, and on a US keyboard that's next to the letter P, P as in Paul on your keyboard, and I'm going to click one time at the start of this wire. Just click, and it didn't do much, but now I'm going to hold down the shift key and come all the way to the other side and click. And that's the tip, is that when you do that and let go, it creates a straight line from the first click to the second click. So, and to get rid of that wire just without having to carefully paint all the way across, click, click, and again. Now you might be tempted to just go down here and hold down the shift key and click again, or here and start and click again, but then it's going to create a line diagonally from your last click to this click. So you always have to start with one click, and then you can do your second click. So same thing here, one click, kind of right in the middle of that wire. Then hold down my shift key, head over to the other side of the wire, and click once again. And that will go ahead and remove that, that second wire. Now you might be asking, well, Terry, shouldn't you be doing this on a new layer? Shouldn't you be doing this? You know, people always ask me that. And I always say, yes, if you want to create a new layer, by all means, as a backup, create a new layer. But I always also remind them that when I'm working on a raw file, there's no way for me to save over the raw file with these changes. So my raw file is always my backup to go to. So, but by all means, if this makes you nervous doing this on the main background, duplicate the layer first and away you go. All right, next up. Now, what he wanted to accomplish with this coyote was, and I agree, I don't like the background that it's on, I don't like the grass peeking through the snow. And his request was to put it on a white background. Now, I'm going to honor his request, but then I'm going to do it my way. So let's do what he wants first, and then let me show you what else I would do. All right, the next thing he was having a problem with was cutting out the coyote and not making it look like you cut it out with a pair of scissors. Because as you see, if we zoom in, you can kind of see that there's a lot of fur and just fur sticking up on the top part of it, and then it kind of smooths out as it goes underneath. It's not nearly as much. But if you don't cut that out carefully, I don't know what I'm doing here. If you don't cut that out carefully, you'll end up with looking like you just cut off all the fur. It looks like a very hard edge cut. So what we want to do is first I would always do a select subject, because the subject's clearly defined. It knows that there's a coyote there, and that's going to be probably a hard edge selection, because although select subject has gotten better with people, it hasn't gotten much better with animals. So the fur is not even affected. That is wonderful. Okay, yeah, the fur is not affected with if you're talking about the first tip. Yeah, because that's what the spot healing brush is great for. All right, next up. So now, because the fur isn't really cut out that well, and before I go any further, by the way, let's go ahead and put this, change the background into a layer. So here's another just bonus tip, that if you want to change your background to a layer, let me zoom out because I zoomed in on the wrong spot. There we go. You'll notice you have this little lock icon. Just simply clicking the lock will convert the background into a layer. So that's an old tip that I just take for granted. Now what I'm going to do is also fit Photoshop into this window. There we go. And let's go ahead and make a new layer that's going to be the white that he wants. So I'm just going to fill that layer with white. By the way, my default colors happen to be white and black, but if they weren't, you would hit the letter D as in default, and that will change them to black and white, and then you can hit the letter X to switch white to the foreground, black to the background. So X just toggles your foreground and background colors. All right, now, with that said, I'm going to hold down my Option key and hit Delete. Yeah, Option Delete. Let's deselect first because I want to fill the entire layer. All right, deselect. Now we got the entire layer. I was laughing because that was a rookie mistake. But anyway, deselect first, which is also a keyboard shortcut, Command D, PC Control D, and then you can do it Alt Delete, Alt Backspace, or in my case, Option Delete to fill that new layer with white. Now we're going to pull that new layer behind the existing layer so that we end up with that white background that he wanted. Now let's go back to the original layer, and now let's go ahead and do our select subject. And there we go. And that will make a selection of the coyote. Probably not a great selection, but it made one. And now we're going to go ahead and see how good or bad that selection is by going into Select and Mask. All right, so now that I've got into Select and Mask, that'll bring up the workspace in just a second here. And there it is. I can see what it looks like on that white background because I'm using the view onion skin, or I can even say on layers, either one would show me what's behind it. So it's showing me the white that's behind it. I can also see it on as a mask. I can see it on black. And again, the amount of opacity or transparency is showing me what that would look like. So you have lots of different view options, but let's go ahead and stick to the onion skin, 100% transparent. And this is the problem that I think he was running into, is that the cut looks so rough. It did not look clean. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in and there's two modes for your refinement. These are fairly new. There's color aware, which you're trying to cut something out that's a distinct color from what you're cutting out. Great. Or object aware, where it's looking more at the object, not so much at the colors. So I want to definitely be in the object aware mode, which I'm in. And you can even go in and refine hair, but I'm not going to do that because, again, this is not a person. So next up, I'm going to switch over to my Refine Edge tool, which it normally puts you in by default. And the next thing I'm going to do is make the brush size smaller. So what I have found is that if you want a better refinement of your edge, smaller is better when it comes to the brush. So I'm just going to reduce the brush size just a little bit, not making it any bigger than it needs to be. And you notice that that brush has a plus sign. And the plus sign is what you want to target with that plus sign is the original background. Even though we don't see it, we know it's wherever the white is. And then I'm just going to come over. Oh, my calibration's way off on this display. Hang on for a second. I'm going to do it with my mouse. I'm just going to come over to the edge, keeping the plus sign away from the coyote. And you'll say, well, wait, aren't you bringing back the background? No, I'm actually painting to see the fur. As soon as I let go of the mouse, it will recalculate the background based on what I just told it to do. So just getting in, coming around all those edges, and we'll come all the way down, and then we'll let go. Once I let go, there it is. It's recalculating, bringing back some of that fur. We can do now. Look at the before here. We're going to do the same thing around this bottom edge, which again, it's not as much fur sticking up, but it definitely should not look that hard edge when you do it. And then when I let go, it brings out that fur. So it's giving us the look that he was looking for, where it doesn't look so cut out with a pair of scissors. All right, there we go. And again, if you can go over this edge as many times as you think you need to, and to kind of refine it. And the only thing I didn't do was I didn't do between the paws here, the legs here. We don't see the paws because they're in the snow. And we're going to come around and do the same thing around this edge. Now, speaking of that, we don't see the paws because they were in the snow. This is why I'm not sure why he wants this on a white background, because you're not going to have paws unless you're going to Photoshop some other paws in there. It's going to look obvious. So that's why I said I'm going to do what he asked, but then I'm going to show you what I would do. All right, So now that's looking much better. So a couple more things I would do. I would come in, it's not much of a problem in this particular photo, but if there was a cast, like a green or blue or orange or whatever cast from the original background, I would go ahead and turn decontaminate colors on to get rid of that cast. Like I said, it's not a problem here, but I would go ahead and just simply turn it on anyway, because what that will do is that will, again, kind of smooth out those edges a little bit more and just give me that better cutout from this. Now, new layer with a layer mask is going to be the default anytime you turn on decontaminate colors. And I'm going to go ahead and I got Smart Radius on. You can also see a tweak here if we just increase the Smart Radius just a little bit. And what Smart Radius does is it says anything that should be a hard edge, I'm going to keep it a hard edge. Anything that should be a soft edge, I'm going to make it soft. All right, so now we'll click OK. And I can keep refining that and going in, but you get the idea. So what that did was it created a new layer with the mask that we just made, and now you see it on the white background. And I could save and close because that's what he wanted. But that's not what I want. So what I want is I want to see this on a better background, just not so grassy. In other words, I don't want to see the grass sticking through. So I went on Adobe Stock. And I just searched for, there's a free collection on Adobe Stock, by the way. You can just search for free images. I just said snow background or snow field of snow. I think that's what I searched for. And when I got 3 images that I like, so I'm just going to pull one of these down from my Creative Cloud library. And I may not be able to pull it down from there, but I'll just go ahead and pull it over here. And that will bring it in. And I can go ahead and size it where I want it. There we go. And I know that, here, let me show you what that's going to look like. I'll pull it down now below the layer that we're working on, and there we go. Now, again, that makes it look more natural because there is snow there and the paws kind of work out better and so forth and so on. But what I don't like about it is I don't like the tree behind the coyote because it's just distracting because it's hard to separate the coyote from the tree. So what I'm going to do is go back to that winter landscape with snow image that I downloaded, hit Command T for free transform, PC Control T, and right click and say flip horizontal. So just because, we don't care which way this tree is facing. And that way it kind of separates the coyote from from everything that's going on in the background and kind of makes it stand out more. So those are some of the kinds of tips that I would have given this person for this image. And if you're watching, I know Bill might be watching live. If you're not watching live, Bill will see it on the replay. That's kind of what I would do. All right. So people are making suggestions like, couldn't you do blend if, and couldn't you do this, and couldn't you do that? And yes, you could do all of those things, but I'm not doing those things right now. All right, so will this tutorial be saved for future viewing? Yes, all the videos are always saved for future viewing. Hi, Sally, how are you? All right, so anyway, I miss Michigan sometimes, not this time of year, but I do miss Michigan sometimes as well. All right, so with that said, I miss the people, not the cold weather. All right, now let's move on. Okay, so next up, back to my list. So one of the things you might have noticed is that my tool panel might look a little different than your tool panel. Like I've got some tools that are showing that in a different order than you may see. I have some tools that are separated out that you may not see, that you may not have, so forth and so on. It's because my next tip is that you can create your own custom tool panel. That way you don't ever have to see tools you never use. And the tools you do use, you can put them in the order that will make more sense to you. And they're like, I use this tool all the time. I want it near the top of the tool panel, not buried down at the bottom and under other tools. So next tip is that you can go into Edit, come down to Toolbar. That'll bring up this panel. And in this panel, you can then go in and start organizing the tools that in the order you want them in. So I put the Move tool up, it was already at the top. I then separated out the Object Selection tool, separated out the Quick Selection tool, and then these Marquee tools are here. And so basically I'm keeping all my selection tools near the top. Now, for example, I think I want the Spot Healing Brush above that. So I can just literally drag it up, and I think I want the healing brush right below that. And I notice they're separate. They're not in the same group. So therefore, they're individually separate from each other. And as I'm moving them around, you see them move on the actual tool panel itself. So if I put the patch tool underneath the healing brush, then you see the patch tool underneath the healing brush. And since I don't really use the healing brush as much as I use the spot healing tool, I will go ahead and group those together so that they're in a group, and I can always pull down and get to the one that's underneath it because I don't use that one as much. Tools that you don't use at all or hardly ever, you can drag off to the right here, which you can see a bunch of tools I put over to the right because I hardly ever use them. And therefore they're not in your main tool panel. Now, I do use the line tool sometimes. Let's go ahead and pull that one back. I'll put it down near the bottom, and there we go. Now, once you're happy with your tools, if you just click done, that'll be your new tool set. But what you should probably do is go ahead, and I'm going to recommend this as a tip, go ahead and save it as a preset. I notice I called mine TW Retouching Toolbar, so I'm just going to go ahead and click to give it that same name and replace the old one. And yes, replace. And that way, if I ever need to load those on a new machine, or I get a new computer, or I want to put them on a second computer, I can just copy that file over and load it in, and all my tools will be exactly the way I want them to be. Okay, so that's one. You can create as many separate toolbars for as many different purposes as you want, and just save those presets. Now, the next one, speaking along the same lines, is there are lots of things we do under the menus that sometimes you may forget where it is under the menu because you don't use it every single day, and it may get buried. Like, for example, one of the ones I always end up having to look for, because I never can remember if it's under Edit, or if it's under Image, or if it's under Layer. So I'm always looking for, and I still don't see the one I'm looking for. Hang on, I think it's under Edit. Yep, there it is. Okay, I see it because I don't have multiple layers selected. So let me go ahead and select 2 or more layers. And if I go under the Edit menu, it's called, and it's because I don't have that layer visible. Hang on. There we go. Now I should see it. I still don't see it. How come I can't do both of those at the same time? And it's there, but it's grayed out. All right, let's do those 2. There we go. Huh. What I was getting to is I want to use my auto align layers, and I'm not in the right mode to get to that. But anyway, let's say I can never remember where that is, which is the key of this tip. Let's go to Edit Menus, and if I bring over that window and I go down to Edit, which is where that feature is, it's Edit, and it's under, there it is, Auto Align Layers. I can never remember where it is. I can give that a color so that it jumps out at me. And therefore, when I go to edit, it's green. Oh, there it is right there. Like I can, so the ones that I'm always looking for, I can give them different colors, or I can give them the same color, whatever it is, so that when I'm looking through a menu, the things I've made a different color are the ones that I use, but forget where they are. And that way they jump out at me visually all the time. Okay, so colorizing your menus. Now, this leads to the next tip. So custom toolbar, custom menus you can turn on and off, colorize, so forth and so on. Next one, last tip. I want to go in and choose over here on the far right-hand side, this little square icon. Looks like a screen. Choose a workspace. So you can go in and you'll choose from either one of the default workspaces, and you probably already have. So you start off with Essentials. You can use 3D workspace, motion, painting, where I'm using the photography default workspace. And these are all great, but there's nothing like your own. So if we go ahead and create a new workspace, and we can call this my TW Photography. TW Photography workspace, and then I can tell it what to include. So I can tell it to include the toolbars that I'm currently using, the menus the way they are, and whatever keyboard shortcuts, if I've modified keyboard shortcuts the way they are. And that way, I can make as many different workspaces for the kind of work I do. And it will always show me the right tools. It'll always show me the right menu options. It'll always show me the right menu options in color. And it'll also, if I modified keyboard shortcuts and save those as sets, it will always choose the right keyboard shortcuts. My memory is not good enough to have multiple sets of keyboard shortcuts. So I keep one set that is the default, and that's what I live by. All right, anyway, let's go ahead and hit save. And now that is the workspace I'm on. So if I go, that's the workspace I'm on. So if I go back to Essentials, that's the Essentials workspace, and it moved the panels and see what it did with the tools. Like it completely changed the tools and what's where. And now if I go back to look at the tool panel, if I go back to my TW photography workspace, look at the tool panel, it changed to my favorite layout for the tools. So that way, Photoshop doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to be a bunch of things you'll never use. It can be just the things you use all the time in the order you want them in, wherever possible, and little tidbits and colors to pop out so that you can go ahead and see them more quickly. All right. My brush switched from a circle to a crosshatch, and I can't get back to. Okay, so David Hundley is asking, hey, that tip with the click from one side to the other for spot healing brush. He said his brush is turned into a crosshatch, and I see you referencing the caps lock. It's usually because the caps lock is down. So for example, if I go to that spot healing brush, which I can't do on that layer, but if I go here and do it, oh, wait. Why am I not getting the ability to do any of this stuff? Hang on for a second. There we go. If I go to a layer where I can do it and I put the caps lock key down, notice that my tool has changed from a circle to that crosshatch you're talking about. It's because my caps lock key is down. So it's called precision mode. With the caps lock key down, turn off the caps lock, you'll get back to a circle. All right. I'm going to go ahead and turn that layer back off. I don't need it. And we're going to move on to the next image because I'm done with this image too. So let's get to our next tip. Well, one more thing before we leave this image. Let's say you then want to start going in and zooming in and working on specific parts of the image. So I want to zoom into the eyes and work on the eyes of this image. All right, cool. I'm zoomed in and it's great. But I also then want to go start working on other things. Let me rephrase that. While I'm zoomed in, I might switch to that spot healing brush and start doing things on that particular image. Oh, it's a smart object for some reason. There we go. I might go in and start doing specific things to that image, and great, I can start working on it. But then I need to zoom out and zoom into another part of the image, or I could pan around. Well, you got the navigator panel, which is great for that. And by the way, you're usually on histogram, but you can switch to the navigator panel, and you can actually move around in the navigator panel to get to specific spots. So I can get down here to this grass that was popping up from the original background, and I can go in and grab my paintbrush, and I can grab some black paint, and I can go ahead and make my brush smaller, and I can go to the mask, and I can start masking out that grass if that grass were the problem. And it looks like that's not the problem. Hang on, let's see. Yep, that should be the problem. Oh, hang on. Do I still have a selection made? I am not applying. Am I applying paint to that mask? No. Properties. I don't know what's going on with that mask all of a sudden on this image, but something weird's happening. Brush. Wrong mode. That's it. I was like, something's up. Normal. There we go. That's what it should be doing. When in doubt, look at your options to make sure something's not set from the last time you used that tool. So I can go in and start working on this, and I can navigate to whatever other spot I want to get to. Oh, I don't like that little hair. Oh, wrong tool. Sorry. I like that little hair sticking out, and so I fix that with the right selection. There we go. Fix that, and away I go. So that's great. That's one way to do it using the navigator. But if you want to use the faster, easier way to do it, I'm still on the healing brush. I'm not on the zoom key anymore. But if I hold down the letter H and click, then I can move around. I see the size of my viewing area. And I can move around to whatever area I want and just let go. And now I'm working on that area. So hold down the letter H, click, and then you can pan around to whatever you want and let go. So that's called bird's eye view. And it's just one of the ways to work faster and get around your image faster to the areas you want to work on. And that's really the tip. All right, now that we've done that, we can always hit Command or Control 0 to zoom out. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go in and look at my next tip. My next tip is we're going to switch images. There we go. Let's go to this image. Let's open it up. Let's zoom out. And this image, a friend of mine showed me this image of her father when he was in the military, and I was like, oh, that's a cool image. That could definitely use a little Photoshop love. There's lots of little specks from the original print on the image. There's a crease here. There's a little piece missing there. So I went in. I'm not going to spend a lot of time retouching the image because that's not the purpose of the tip. So let me just go ahead and do a couple quick things real fast. Oh, hang on. Sorry. I am fumbling with my fingers today on this mouse. Hang on, let me go back. Ah! Hold on, folks. Hold on. There we go. Trying to get back to that image. There we go. Put it back in the tab. All right, so I'm going with my patch tool, and I can just start patching out some of that stuff that we see. And I can start patching out this line here at the top and get rid of some of that stuff. And this line here, I can use that same tip we used earlier with a spot healing brush, making my brush a little bit bigger and clicking at the top and then holding down the Shift key and coming down and clicking. And that will click. And now that tip's not working for some reason. I was just having one of those days here. Wait, hold on. Deselect. Let's try it again. There we go. I had a selection made. Selection I didn't see, which can happen from time to time. So whenever in doubt, if something's not working, hit Command or Control D to deselect because more than likely either your tool's in the wrong mode or you have a selection still made. All right, so anyway, I went in and I did all that kind of stuff. Now that I did all that kind of stuff, the next thing I wanted to do was kind of get rid of this older sepia tone and convert it into a black and white. All right, so to do that, I just simply used one of my favorite ways to make a black and white these days is the camera raw filter. And with the camera raw filter, let's go in and use the or actually we'll just use the profiles here. There's one called monochrome and black and white, and we get in that and I can pick the kind of black and white that I want. And so I usually just hover over each one, noting mentally, okay, I like B&W number 3, and I keep going. If I don't like one better, then I'll go back to that one. I kind of like number 5 as well. Let me see, 3 versus 5. 3 has more contrast. I could go with either one. So, but let's say 3 for the sake of argument today. All right, so I make it 3. And then the next thing I wanted to do was like, okay, I got this image nicely done, and I went ahead and retouched all that, but I'm not going to do it now. I got the image nicely done. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into our filter menu, come down to neural filters, and with neural filters, we're going to go in and turn on Colorize. And that will use AI to figure out what it thinks the colors of this image should be. And it did a really good job, other than I don't like the jackets 2 different colors, but that's just, another thing. So I'll pick which one I like. I kind of like the brown jacket since that's the bulk of it. Then another bonus tip is that in the area where it didn't get the color just right or the way I want, I can go in and click over here on the preview to click and edit the local focal points. And that will bring up a color picker. And I wish this color picker had an eyedropper. I've not been able to figure out how to get an eyedropper because I really want to just sample that brown, but I think that brown's there as a preview, so there's no way to actually get to it. So I'm going to have to guesstimate where I think that brown is. And I'm going to think that brown's like right in here. And so when I click OK, that will kind of blend. Yeah, that's kind of close enough. It kind of gave me that color in that area to give me the same color. Great, black and white. Pretty much easily converted to a color image without a whole lot of work. And if there's still more I need to do, it's going to output this color rendition as a new layer anyway. So great, done. Now I got my new layer. So the next thing I thought about was they talked about having this image printed and framed. And I thought, oh, that'd be kind of cool. But a couple things. Number one, we'll get to this in a minute. I don't know if it's enough resolution to print this. I didn't even look at the size of it. Number two, I kind of would love to see what this would look like framed, or what it would look like as a frame. So the next thing I'm going to do is go to my, I'm going to go in and do two things. I'm going to, see, do I need to do this on this? Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer combining both of these layers together. So this is a keyboard shortcut we've used for years. I always joke and say, it's the left side of the keyboard. So it's Command or Control on Windows, Option or Alt on Windows, Shift, E as in Edward. And that will make a composite layer of all the layers you selected. So in this case, that created a composite layer of my color, and it's there all by itself, and that's great. I still have the color overlay, I still have the original black and white, but now I've turned those off to just get to this one. Great. Now what I want to do is I want to create a new layer, just an empty layer, all by itself, and we're going to use that as our picture frame layer. And in our picture frame layer, I'm going to go ahead now and go to a filter that you probably have never used or never knew what it was for. So we're going to go to Render, and it's one called Picture Frame. And I got to say, usually when you see these kind of automated generating filters, they're not usually the best designs, because I think a lot of cases it's done by an engineer, not a designer. So like Simple Lace, no, I'm not going to have any use for that. Wisps, again, I'm not going to have any use for that, at least not in this case. So I'm going to come all the way down to Art Frame. And the cool thing about Art Frame is, and don't be dissuaded by the preview, because I look at all these frames down here and they're brown. I'm like, oh, I don't want a brown frame, I wanted a black frame. Well, you can go to Art Frame, which is just a simple frame, and you can then make it whatever color you want. So that brings up a color picker, and then you can go in and say, hey, whatever, I wanted a red frame. I don't, but let's say I did. And that will make it a red frame. So don't be dissuaded by the color you see in the preview, because you can make it whatever color you want. All right, so now let's go in and change it to black. Yeah, Voodoo Val, I know, it's cool, right? Things that people rarely ever pay attention to. Now the weird thing, and this threw me too. It's like, wait a minute, that frame doesn't look like it's going to be the right size. It looks like it's going to be too narrow from left to right, and it doesn't look like it's going to fit the image. And then I start going and messing with margins, and I'm like, no, that's making it worse. You're still not giving me what I want. And then size, and that's really just the size of the frame, which actually I kind of like a thicker version of that. And all of that, and I'm like, don't waste your time trying to make it fit your image. It's not. It's just not going to fit your image. So just go ahead and click OK and let it go. And that's why we do it on a new layer. So let's click OK. And like I said, don't worry about the size, because it's not going to match your image. But now that you got it on there as its own layer, you can now hit Command-T, Control-T on Windows to free transform, and you're going to start trying to scale it, and you're going to say, wait, the proportions aren't the same. Even if I make it bigger, it's still too narrow. I need it wider. Well, this is the one time in a year that you get to hold down the Shift key and stretch something to be non-proportional, because it's a frame. It doesn't need proportions. It doesn't need to be. Okay, so now that we got that frame in place, which in and of itself could be okay, I actually want it to be a little bit cooler looking. So let's go ahead and do a couple things. Let's go ahead, number one, and create another new layer. Drop it down below the portrait. So now the portrait's sandwiched in between my new empty layer, which we'll call this one Frame. We'll call this one Portrait. And we'll call this one Background. So we're making a new background layer. New. All right. So now that I've got the portrait in there, I can go ahead and play with the portrait size. So for example, I can hit Command-T, and I can go ahead and, this time I do want it proportional. I'm going to go ahead and scale the portrait down, because what I want to do is I want to create the look of a art matte, a matte that is going to be kind of cool behind it. All right, so now we got that. We can go to our background new layer, and we can swap the colors from black to white to black. Hold down our Option and Delete key to fill that with white. Great. And now we can go into that portrait, and we can do a couple things. We can go in and use the effects panel, and we can do we can do a stroke around it. So there's a stroke effect. And that just kind of puts a thin black border around it so it doesn't look so photoshopped. So that way it looks more natural, like it's got that matte around it. Great. And if that's all you want, you're cool, you're done. But we can take it one step further. Let's go ahead and go back and double click on that. We turn on stroke, and now you can have multiple strokes if you need it. You can have multiple shadows and so forth and so on if you need it. I don't need multiples, but just pointing out that's what the plus sign is for. I can go ahead and turn on a little bit of inner shadow. And let's see if I like that the way, oh, inner shadow, there we go. Let's turn up the opacity of that a little bit. I'm not really seeing that much. There we go. So let's do the size. And let's change the direction it's coming from. And now that I can see it better, I can pull it back a little bit. And that really makes it look like it's behind the mat because you're giving it that depth with the shadow. All right, so that's just taking it up a notch, you know, for people that really want something to not look so Photoshopped. I know Voodoo Val, right? It looks real. All right, so and that's the point, is that when in my eye, that looks real. Now, the only other thing I don't like about that frame is the lighting, because it's just too bright on the right-hand side. So I would take that frame layer and duplicate it. And then let's do our Command T and right-click on it, and let's go ahead and flip it horizontal. And it just, oh, now you just move the white to the other side. You're right. But we could go ahead and simply make a selection. First, let's lock this one in. Make a rectangular selection on that side. Great. And we could go in and we could add a mask. Add a layer mask. Holding down the Option or Alt key to hide whatever was in that rectangle. So now I don't get that bright light on the other side. If you want to do the same thing on the bottom, you could do it again, flip it one more time, and do the bottom so it's not as white. The bottom doesn't bother me nearly as much as that right side being too bright. All right, that was a bunch of little tips mixed in there just because I got carried away working on this image, but have at it. All right, so we did Colorize, we did Neural Filter, we did a frame, we did, you know, creating a fake mat. We did all kinds of things to make that image look cool. Now it's just begging to be, you know, the retouch to be finished on the hat. But otherwise, then you're good to go. All right, next up, let's go in and take a look at faking smoke. So let's go into this image. I've shown this image before, if I could find it here. Here it is. And let's zoom out. We got Batwoman next to her Batmobile, and I want to create some kind of Gotham red smoke behind it. So first of all, I don't like that car pointing paint. That car shouldn't be there. some other car. I could try and clone that out. I could try and content aware fill that out, or I could just simply, for the sake of time, go into my regular crop tool. There we go. And crop it out. All right, there we go. It's just a distraction. It doesn't need to be there. All right, next up. Now we got rid of that distraction. What I want to do is I want to create the illusion that there's red smoke behind the car. So, nope, I'm not going to render fire. That's a nice choice, but not this time. All right, so first, in order to have smoke behind something, it's easier if it can literally be behind it. So I'm going to just do a simple tip that whenever I want to put something sandwiched in between the real background and the subject, which is the car, and the background, which is the night sky, then what I can do is just simply use select subject once again. It's going to try and select the car. Oh, it did not this time. Hang on. Undo. Undo. Select subject. It's AI. Sometimes it does what you want. Sometimes it doesn't. There we go. It's the crop that threw it off, because I was like, I've done this before and it worked fine. So I'll crop it after the fact. All right, so it did a okay job, not awesome, but okay. It gave me most of what I want. So I'm going to go into my my quick selection tool, hold down my Option key, which is always subtract, and subtract the pieces out that I don't want it to do. So I don't want it to get any of that top of the above the car. We can hold down, let go of the option to add that little piece back in. It's missing all of the door, so I can add all of that in. And again, I'm not really concerned about this stuff underneath. I'm not really concerned about her. I don't really care about the stuff at the bottom because I'm only going to put the smoke at the top anyway. So again, your selection doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be a decent selection of the shape. Now that I got that decent selection of the shape, I'll go ahead and hit Command J on Mac, PC Control J, and all it does is put it on its own layer. So that put it on its own layer, it's not a good cutout at all, but all I needed it to be was by itself. So now that it's on its own layer, you don't see any visual difference because it's still sitting on top of the good one. Now I can go in and do that crop. So we hit the letter C and we'll go ahead and crop off that other car. Great. And now we can go ahead and create our fake smoke. So we're going to go ahead and create another layer. We're going to sandwich that layer in between. And now that I got my layer in between, we're going to go to our brush, letter B for brush. And we're going to bring up the brushes panel, which is this icon up here in the top left of the control panel at the top there. And we're going to go to brushes. And this will show you all the brushes you have in Photoshop. And you're going to say, well, Terry, I don't have nearly the brushes you don't have. I don't have these watercolor brushes, these spatter brushes, these watercolor 5 brushes. How the heck do I get these? Well, in the upper right-hand corner of the brushes panel, there's a Get More Brushes. That's where I got them from. And Kyle Webster, who is one of our evangelists who will be up later today, is the maker of many of these brushes that we now give away for free. You used to have to buy these from Kyle Webster. Now we kind of acquire Kyle Webster's brushes and we give them away now. So you can download the watercolor set just like I did. It's free to download, and it should automatically install in Photoshop, but if it doesn't, you'll just go back to this panel and you'll say load, what is it, pen brushes or load, import brushes. Import brushes, go point to where your downloads is, that's where it is, and then add them in. So I did that. Now I'm scrolling through watercolor 5. And what I'm looking for in watercolor 5 is kind of a brush that looks like smoke, like Kyle's Real Watercolor 500 Giant is the one I'm using. So now that I got that color, I got that brush, and you can go ahead and make your brush nice and big for this. Now that I did that, I'm going to go ahead and sample or get the color that I want. I could use the red right from her suit. So here's just a bonus tip. If you want a brush in a particular color that's already in the image, hold down your Option or Alt key to temporarily turn into the eyedropper. Click. That will give you that color is now your foreground color, which is over here to my left of my head. And now I can go ahead and just simply, let's see, our flow is on normal. We're on that. Why am I? There we go. We start painting our smoke. And because we're on the layer in between the car that we cut out and the actual car, it looks like it's behind it. And like I said, in this case, it doesn't have to be perfect because we're just going to put some smoke up there. All right, so let me undo. I got a little carried away there. I didn't want that much, but let's just, yeah, there we go. Something like that. I'm just using light strokes. If you have a tablet, that means you can do pressure sensitivity, and you can kind of create that smoky effect of what's going on in the sky behind your image. So that's one way to create kind of a smoke effect using that. Can you use your own images for frames? No, the frame filter is what it is. It is what it is. That's it. It's what you see is what you get. You don't get to import your own. Nice. That would be nice, but you don't. All right, so smoky, making it smoky. All right, next up. Let's go ahead and jump over to this tip since we're here. I'm just looking through my tips here and looking at the amount of time and see which one I want to get to that's more important. All right, let's do a couple of things really quickly. Okay, so along the same lines, one of the things that separates Photoshop from Lightroom is that, or any other application we make for photo editing, is that you can add text. And that's one of the things that people come to Photoshop just to do, even if they're not going to do any editing. So if I go in now and I go above this layer and I click the type tool and I click my my selection right on the image, it will put in lorem ipsum in whatever the default color was last time, and I can go ahead and just simply type in Batwoman. All right, so now that I got that, I want to do some things to it because it doesn't look the way I want it to look. It's not the font I want it to look. It's none of those things. So I'm going to go ahead and first of all, Command A, PC Control A to make it all selected. Now, in order to size it, I could go up here and choose the fonts, and that's great. I can say, oh, make it 72 point, make it bigger. And you would say, well, what if I want more than 72 point? Well, the menu stops at 72 point. You could go ahead and type, you know, and go in here and double click and type 90 point. 90 point. There we go. And that will make it 90 points, but it's still not big enough. And if you're not the kind of person that guesses point sizes without 2 or 3 tries, then you can hold down your Command key while the text is selected, and you can literally drag it to make it bigger. But hold down your Shift key once you start dragging if you want to keep it proportional. So in other words, you don't want to stretch the type. Now, it doesn't matter what you made it. It's ended up being 222 point, and you can do it. Now, the other thing is, in addition to the menu, typing and the size, most of Photoshop's sliders, or most of Photoshop's options have a scrubby slider. So as soon as I hover over the actual double T's, then I can actually hold down my mouse button and scrub the type visually to be bigger or smaller. So that's another way to do it. And if you bonus tips on scrubby sliders, if you hold down your Option or Alt key, you're scrubbing at a slower pace, so or more precise pace, I should say. So if you're trying to do that, if you hold down your Shift key, you're scrubbing at super speed. So in other words, I want to quickly jump to a big size, hold down the Shift key, and you're jumping to a big size with not that much scrubbing. All right, so now that we got that in place, the next thing I want is, and by the way, while it's selected, you can hold down your Command or Control key to move it, so I can move it in place and kind of get it where I want it to be. The next thing you might want is you might want to choose a color. So I can grab the color swatch here, and I can say, well, I can make it whatever color I want, right? It can be pink Batwoman. I can be, Batwoman would never probably be in pink. But anyway, I can make it red, I can make it whatever. Or, as I hover outside that box, I can pick a color from the image. So I can make it the yellow in the light. I can make it the beige in this parking structure. I can make it the red from that neon symbol over there. I can make it black like the car. I can make it whatever color I want it to be, or the white that's in the stripe on the road there, and get it that color. So you don't have to live with what you try and find in there. You can actually use the color from the image just like we did for the brush. All right, last but not least, the font is Adobe Clean, which is our internal font. So let's not make it Adobe Clean. As I hover over these font choices, I get to see, actually that's kind of a badass Adobe, or badass font for Batwoman. Adorn 5 Condensed Sand is what I ended up with. And let's see, yep, there's only a regular for that, and away we go. So that will give me my text, and my text remains completely editable. I can move it around as an object. I can reshape it, warp it, change the colors, individual letters, whatever I want to do. Okay, so that is how we would work with the text to get it that color that we want. Next up, we only got a couple minutes left, and I knew this would happen. All right, so let's get back to the, what if your image, remember that soldier image, what if that image wasn't big enough to print? Remember that problem? So I showed you this tip before, which is super resolution, and I show it all the time from Lightroom. If you go open, and let me jump out of this, and I have this image of a guitar, and it's a low resolution image. Let's drag that into the open dialog box. So it jumps to that guitar, great. And I want to open it and make it bigger. Then what I'm going to do is, if I just open it right now, it's just going to open it as a JPEG. So I'm going to switch my format to Camera Raw. So I'm telling this JPEG to open as a raw image, even though it's not a raw file. Now that it's there, I can right click on it, and I can go to Enhance, and I can choose Super Resolution and enhance it. So that will take the image that was originally only 576 pixels by 922 and make it double the size. 1152 by 1844, and it will make it a new DNG file. So if I just click done, that new DNG file will be next to the original file that I just did. There it is, enhanced DNG, twice the size as a raw file. Now, there's another way to do this. If you're not a Lightroom user, you can do this in Lightroom, but if you're not a Lightroom user, you also have the ability to install Adobe Bridge. And in Bridge, you could do the same thing. You can grab the JPEG, you can hit Command R as in raw. That will just take you right to raw in Bridge, and you can do the same enhance to make it a super resolution image and click enhance. And that will put a new DNG file right next to the original that's twice the size without losing any quality. That's the big thing. So when we say twice the size, it's not so much just twice the size, it's twice the size and it looks the same. So here's the original guitar. Let's zoom back in on it. Here's the new version. Let's zoom in on it. And the quality is not better. But it's not worse. It's the same. It's whatever quality it was, but double the resolution. All right. With that said, we are out of time, folks. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next week. Cheers. Stay tuned for the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge and more masterclasses. Bye, everybody.